I'm Bill Glassman. I'm author of Unleavened Bread of Life, The Birth and Divine Timing of Jesus the Messiah. Today we're going to be considering the day of the resurrection, but we're going to be doing it beyond the English text. We're going to be looking at the various words from the Greek New Testament that provide depth, clarity, and a correct understanding regarding the resurrection. These words are found in Matthew chapter 12, verse 40. Jesus is speaking. Just as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the sea monster, so will the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. We're going to be considering the resurrection, which of course raises the issue of the crucifixion. When did the crucifixion occur so that we can time out the resurrection? Those who believe in a Thursday or a Friday crucifixion do so pointing to the concept of time that is understood within Jewish culture and frankly around the world, where a piece of a unit of time equals the whole. When the ball drops, we refer to it as the new year, not the first second of the new year, the whole year. The same was true with the Jewish concept of time. A second equaled a minute, an hour, a day, a week, a year, and goes on from there. The problem with adopting that and superimposing it on what Jesus said is that it doesn't work. You see, as my father taught me, as they taught me in seminary, as is preached across America and the world, no doubt, a Friday crucifixion provides perhaps a sliver of time on Friday and sliver of time on Sunday and all of Saturday in the middle. And if Jesus used a word which exists in the Greek referring to a 24-hour period, as, by the way, is used in reference to Paul when he was 24 hours in the deep, that word was used. So it was common, it was understood, but that is not what is used when Jesus talks about the 3 days and 3 nights. The word that is talked about is a separation of that. It is nukes, 3 nights, hemeron, 3 days. And again, you have the Jewish concept of time beginning the day with the evening, which you see again in Scripture. And the evening and the morning was the first day. But again, Jesus didn't say he would be in the grave 3 24-hour periods. He said he would be in the grave 3 day periods and 3 night periods. If you look at a Friday crucifixion, again, based on a 24-hour period, you can make the argument it works. But not if you look at Jesus' words correctly, because there's not even a sliver of a third night. Jesus' words rule out the possibility of a Friday crucifixion. Let's continue. If you're going to consider a Thursday crucifixion, you can, based on the Jewish concept of time, make the argument that at least you have a little bit of a day there and 2 full days, and you have 3 nights. But the problem with that is, number one, I'm not sure that Jesus was really referring to that concept and allowing a piece. His words are fulfilled when he says them, and he didn't say a part of a day or a night. So personally, I don't think that works. The other problem with a Thursday crucifixion is you're not going to find it, at least I couldn't, in ancient documents. You have the biblical record that documents a Wednesday crucifixion, and then you have documents starting in the 3rd century and beyond that talk about a Friday crucifixion. I know of none that refer to a Thursday crucifixion, and perhaps that's because as the Jews designed and produced their calendars, they did so in a fashion that night, the night of the Passover meal, wasn't allowed to be on a Thursday. That's the current custom, and there's no reason to believe that wasn't the custom at that time. Perhaps that's why nobody suggested a Thursday crucifixion until fairly recent that's been discussed. So again, you can't rule out a Thursday crucifixion based on Jesus' words if you use the Jewish concept, but you can rule it out other ways. A Wednesday crucifixion works perfectly. You have 3 days, 3 nights, and the completion of them at dusk Saturday night, which should perhaps get the mind rolling. But didn't Jesus come out of the tomb Sunday morning? No. Mark 16:9 says he greeted the women Sunday morning, having already risen. So it doesn't say that. The completion of Jesus' words about himself were fulfilled Saturday night at dusk. Let's continue. In another video, the day of the crucifixion, we go into specific things in Scripture that prove a Wednesday crucifixion. One was the women's work between two Sabbaths, the high Sabbath and the weekly Sabbath. I'm not going to go into detail here. And also the fact that the Roman guard was on till the third morning, the third Hemeron, from Thursday morning to Friday, Saturday, and Sunday morning, which is why the women arrived. We go into more detail of that in that presentation and in a greater depth, of course, in Unleavened Bread of Life. I would suggest you look at those, but we're not going to go into them deeper here. In addition to the Greek words nux and hemeron, nighttime period, daytime period, there's 5 other Greek words that we're going to look at that add specificity and clarity regarding the resurrection. How it happened, who did it, and the timing thereof. We're going to look at each one of these. The first is a simple article, the. You would translate that the, and depending on the structure of it, you would translate it with descriptive words. This structure is the dative case, or more specifically, the locative case. We would consider it in English an indirect object, which in addition to a phrase adds some clarity and description to what's going on in the sentence. This structure of the article appears a number of times with the phrase on the, both of those in that structure, third day, on the third day, and it appears with the word egero, which is a word where someone is acting upon something else. So, on the third day, someone or something acted upon Jesus. Well, the Father raised the Son. Let's move on to that. That's word 1453, pronounced egero, which this word appears 144 times in the Greek New Testament. Each and every time you see that word appear, it's a situation where someone or something is acting on someone or something else, bringing death to life, bringing someone from an unconscious state, for example, asleep, to consciousness, bringing someone from disability to ability, or from a lower position to a higher position, standing or active. Again, this word is always used where someone is acting on someone else or something on something else. In that case, regarding Jesus and the resurrection, it's passive voice. Jesus' body received the action of the Father restoring the Son within it. The Father brought Jesus back to life within his body. Here are examples where you'll see that discussed. On the third day, to be raised, that's before it happened, that's in the infinitive passive. Matthew 17:23, on the third day he will be raised up, that's future indicative passive again. And a third verse from Matthew in 20:19, on the third day he will be raised up, again, future indicative passive. Luke 9:22, on the third day to be raised, again an infinitive in passive, someone else causing the resurrection. And 1 Corinthians 15:4, he was raised on the third day according to the Scripture. These examples hopefully reinforce that Greek word and how it's used and how the resurrection happened. Let's continue. Another important Greek word to understand is Strong's Greek word 450, anastemai. This word is a combination of 2 words. Ana, which means up, to, anew, again, back, and the word hestemai, meaning to stand or to present. That could be considered appear, and other words as well. Using those 2 words together, you have stand up, stand again, appear anew. And that's how that word generally should be translated. It can be translated to raise or to rise, and unfortunately, far too often, English translations render this word exactly that way, treating it as though it's a synonym of the other Greek word. there's a nuance of meaning that we need to capture and we need to understand. Otherwise, you create a problem. You have a situation where the men of Nineveh on Judgment Day raise themselves to life. And that's not accurate. Again, let me talk for just one more minute on this word. It means to raise up, as in to establish. To rise, as in to stand up. To lift up, to bring to a standing position. And occasionally to bring back to life. But again, this is an active word. Its usage is active. The Greek word can appear in, both words can appear in either form. But in one, it is used consistently in the New Testament in the passive sense where somebody is acting on another. This word, I believe 108 times, it appears in the Greek New Testament. It's where someone who is alive and conscious does something of their own choice. Let's continue. Again, Strong's Greek word 450 communicates the conscious act or choice of someone to stand up, in this case on the third day, or to appear again after the third day. And that's an important distinction. Let's keep going. Acts 12:7. I put this in because it's a perfect illustration of the difference of those two words and how they're used. And behold, an angel of the Lord stood by, and a light shone in the cell. Then having, by the way, the illustration here is beautiful because Peter is at peace and God stands asleep in prison. Then having struck the side of Peter, he awakened him. Who's awakened? Him, Peter. Who did the striking? The angel. This is the Greek word 1453 where someone does an action on someone else. This is an angel doing an action on Peter. Then you have the other Greek word saying, get up in haste. And that's exactly what happens. And that's the use of this word 450. Peter, now being awake, now being conscious, makes the choice to get up. Both of these words used in their normal sense as they appear in the Greek New Testament. On the third day, to stand. These are examples of how that word, I believe, should be translated that way, or perhaps appear. Luke 18:33. On the third day, he will stand again. On the third day, to stand again. In Luke 24:46. Thus it has been written, the Christ was to suffer and to stand again or appear again from out of the dead on the third day. The next Greek word we're going to look at is the word meta. It's Strong's Greek word 3326. Meta can be translated a number of different ways and used in a couple different senses. But when it appears in relation to time, it should be translated after. Mark 8:31, 9:31, and 10:34, this word appears related to Christ where it says after the third day. But it's important that it's translated correctly along with the Greek word of what's happening. Otherwise, if you treat those two words we had finished talking about a minute ago, if you treat them as synonyms, you're saying, if you translate meta correctly, after the third day to arise. Well, that means Jesus rose on the fourth day. So you either translate the word about standing up correctly, or you're forced to mistranslate meta, which is what happens, which is unnecessary. You need to translate both words correctly because what it's saying is, after the third day, he appeared. Let's continue. And these are the examples I just mentioned. Mark 8:31. And he began to teach them that it is necessary that the Son of Man to suffer many things and to be rejected by the elders and the chief priests and the scribes and to be killed and after 3 days to appear again. And that's where you have the mistake of on the third day or on the third day to rise, it's commonly translated. if you use it correctly, is after the third day to rise. Again, you've created a problem. But correctly translated, after 3 days to appear again, now it's beautiful and it's correct. Mark 9:31 is similar. For he was teaching his disciples and saying to them, the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men, and they will kill him. And having been put to death, after the third day, he will appear again. After appear. And Mark 10:34. And they will mock him and spit upon him and will scourge him and will put him to death. And after the third day, he will appear again. It's accurate, it's precise to the Greek, and therefore there's no conflict if you translate the Greek correctly. Let's move on. The last one is very interesting, and this is the last Greek word we'll look at, and that's the simple word en. Now, en can be translated quite a number of ways. On, in, at. But when it appears with the phrase we were talking about earlier, the third day, or some similar structure, you're looking at a dative with that, and you have on the, and you attach on to it. How do you translate that into English? On the third day? Or on at the third day? Or on in the third day? So generally English translations just ignore that. Or they ignore the dative case, rather, of the article. Unfortunately, they're missing something. If you examine Strong's Greek word 1722 in their exhaustive concordance, they explain that that is actually a precise phrase. When you have en appear with the dative case regarding a period of time, it actually means at the end of. It's like on. It's a pointer to the very end of that period of time. That provides information for us. John 2:19, Jesus answered and said to them, destroy this temple and here's the structure, at the end of 3 days I will raise it up. Well, by the way, that's not the Father bringing life into it. That's Jesus standing himself up after life is in his body. Now you have precision providing the exact moment of the resurrection at the end of 3 days. That word and that structure appears also here in Acts 40 and 41. This one God raised up, by the way, there's that word used as a passive again, God the Father doing the action on someone else, the Son, at the end of the third day. So that is the point where the Father brought Jesus' life back within the body and granted him to become manifest, not to all the people, but to witnesses, having been chosen beforehand by God, to us who ate and drank with him after his standing again, or appearing again. And that's the second Greek word we talked about, from out of the dead. Again, a beautiful example. You have both words that are falsely treated as synonyms for to rise, treated properly, and treated properly as at the end of. I hope that is a nice summary verse to use. Verses is actually 10, 40, and 41. Let's continue. This is an interesting note. This grammatical structure is used in reference to Christ in the book of Acts, which most scholars would agree was written after the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Luke wrote Acts. So it's as though he wanted to add precision because people were confused. Maybe because they misunderstood Mark, who had used the word meta, and they had just misunderstood the concept of after and what was happening, whether it was a resurrection or appearing. So after Luke's gospel, in Acts, he uses this phrase for clarity. The other place you'll see it in reference to Jesus is in John's gospel. John was the last of the Gospels written. We know that because that's documented in ancient church history, which I discuss in Unleavened Bread of Life. So it's as though John and Luke saw the possibility for confusion if people didn't understand the Greek very well and added that specificity using this phrase. This chart might provide some help. It's a summary of not only the material we just covered here, but also material related to the crucifixion. But let me point out specifically this. The Father raised the Son on May 1st, and I say 6 p.m. Please excuse me for that. It's a generality because the Jews marked time from dusk and they adjusted that based on the sun. So I'm saying 6 p.m. because that's an approximate figure. And by the way, when they were dealing with a high holy day, they would be more specific. It had to be when the third star was visible. So it wasn't just at dusk, it was at that particular point. But for the sake of communicating to a primarily Gentile audience, I'm just rounding that to 6 p.m. to suggest that concept of dusk. That's when the Father put life back into the body of Jesus Christ. He appeared to the women after midnight, became another day based on our calendar, and we would call that May 2nd. Now, by a Jewish calendar, that would still be Nisan 18. So Jesus' resurrection was at the point where the 17th turned to the 18th at the end of that day. Thank you for watching this. We have much to rejoice in. Number one, that God loved us enough to send his Son to die for us. Jesus loved us enough to go through that tremendous torture. We also should be very grateful that the Bible is actually that specific. English translations, unfortunately, haven't been. But if you look at the Greek, it is very precise and very clear exactly what's going on. Thank you for watching. God bless you.